All right, let's talk about Opendoor, ticker symbol OPN. Something interesting is going on with its stock price, and today we're going to do a little technical investigation. We're going to sift through the clues, look at the charts as of November 21st, 2025, and really try to figure out what is actually happening here. So let's get right into it.
So here's the big question, right? The central mystery we're trying to crack today. When you look at Opendoor, is this recent dip just, a temporary little speed bump? Or is it something more? A real sign of trouble on the horizon? That's what we're here to figure out. Okay, first things first, let's get our bearings. The last closing price was $6.75. So, $6.75, that's our starting point. Everything we look at from here on out, it all revolves around this number. But a price on its own doesn't really tell you the whole story. You need context. And right now, at $6.75, Opendoor is kind of floating in no man's land. I mean, it's way off its 52-week high of almost $11, but it's also a good chunk above its low of around $5. So it's stuck in the middle. And that right there is why we need to dig a little deeper.
All right, clue number one. Let's talk about the trend. This is the big one, right? We're trying to figure out the main direction of travel here. Is the stock heading up? Is it heading down? Or is it just going nowhere? Well, as you're about to see, the answer is, it's complicated.
And boom, right away, we hit our first major conflict. If you look at the short-term picture, things look kind of bearish. The price has dipped below its 20-day average, and that's usually a red flag. But if you zoom out and look at the big picture, the long-term trend is still bullish. It's holding up above that 200-day average. It's almost like the stock has a split personality right now.
So that leaves us with a puzzle, doesn't it? We've got these two completely different stories, so which one is actually in control? And maybe even more important, how strong is that trend? Is there any real power behind these moves? To answer that, we need to look at our next piece of evidence.
So to figure out how strong a trend is, we use this cool little tool called the Average Directional Index, or ADX for short. Now, here's the key thing to remember about ADX. It could not care less if the stock is going up or down. All it does is measure the strength of the trend. Think of it like a power meter. And the general rule of thumb is, any score below 25, that's a pretty weak, choppy market.
So what's the reading for Opendoor? Get this. It's 13.18. 13. That is super low. And this is a huge clue for us. It's basically screaming that there is no strong trend here. Despite all the movement, there's no real conviction. It's like a big tug of war, and neither the bulls nor the bears have the strength to pull the other side over the line.
But, okay, even in a weak tug of war, someone's usually leaning back a little harder, right? The ADX has these two components. The minus DI, think of that as the seller's team, is at 30.18. The plus DI, the buyer's team, is at 21.60. So what does that tell us? It tells us that right now, the sellers have a slight edge. They've got the upper hand, even if they're not really pulling with a ton of force.
Okay, so let's piece this together. The trend is weak, but what little trend there is seems to be leaning bearish. So for our second clue, we're going to look at momentum. This isn't just about direction anymore. This is about the speed of the move. How fast are things changing? And for that, our go-to tool is the MACD indicator. And what it's showing right now is something called a bearish crossover. And honestly, it's pretty simple to understand. You see the fast line? When it crosses below the slow line, it's like a signal flare that says, hey, downward momentum is starting to build up. And if we look at the numbers for Opendoor, yep, that's exactly what's happening. The MACD line has officially crossed below the signal line. So the verdict from this particular clue is crystal clear. The sellers are in the driver's seat right now when it comes to momentum. They're pushing the price down harder than the buyers are pushing it up.
But wait a second. Knowing who's driving is one thing, but you also want to know how much gas they have left in the tank, right? Are they just starting a long road trip, or are they about to pull over? That's a really important question. And to answer it, we need one more piece of the momentum puzzle.
And that's where the RSI, the Relative Strength Index, comes in. Think of it as a momentum gauge from 0 to 100. 50 is neutral. Below 30 is oversold, meaning the sellers might be getting tired. Above 70 is overbought. So where's Opendoor? It's at 44.56. So yeah, it's below 50, which confirms the bears are in charge, but it's not even close to that oversold level of 30 yet. What that suggests is this downward move might not be over. The sellers might still have some fuel left.
All right, let's bring it all together now. We've gathered all the evidence, we've looked at the trend, we've measured its strength, we've checked the momentum.
Now it's time to put all these pieces of the puzzle together and deliver the verdict on what's really going on with Opendoor.
So let's just run through the case summary one last time. What do we got? We've got a long-term bullish picture fighting a short-term bearish picture. We've got, super weak trend strength, which just screams indecision in the market. And on top of that, we've got momentum that is clearly, without a doubt, being controlled by the sellers.
So when you take all of that conflicting information and you try to make sense of it, you arrive at this one central conclusion. What we're seeing here, it doesn't look like the start of a total collapse. Instead, it looks like a classic short-term pullback. It's a little dip, a moment of weakness, but it's happening inside of a much bigger and so far still healthy long-term uptrend. And that really brings us to the final and most important question. Our little investigation here has figured out what is happening, but it leaves a huge question for you to think about. When you see a dip like this inside a bigger uptrend, what does it mean? Is this a buying opportunity before the next leg up? Or is it the first crack in the foundation, a warning that the bigger trend is in danger? And that's the multi-million-dollar question this analysis leaves you with.